Welcome to Circles and Spaces, everyone. It's so good to be back for the second episode of the year. If you're unfamiliar with this podcast is all about youth leaders and leaders sharing their weaknesses or things that maybe they don't feel as if they're doing that well. It's all about being vulnerable and sharing openly maybe some of the struggles of leading Gen Z. And it's also really about listening and feeling inspired and feeling encouraged by what other people are up to. So today we have a very, very special episode, don't we, Charlie?
It might be fair to say that this episode may feel a little different to just maybe some of our other episodes. Pretty much because we're going to be talking about something that has been described recently as by some people as one of the greatest moves of God that this generation has seen. And some people would have heard of Asbury already. Most of us probably have. And we've got two very special people with us today. We've got Logan and Jordan Biere joining us today. They went out there not so long ago. And so I guess we can jump straight into it. And I'd love to ask you guys, first of all, for anyone who perhaps hasn't heard of Asbury and what's been going on there, could you just explain what's been going on, what Asbury is, and what's happened?
Yeah, amazing. So, hello, everyone. Really grateful to be on this with you all. I think one of the things that might be helpful is context for me, who I am. I've been in youth ministry work for 15 years and been working with Gen Z for a very long time, and Gen Alpha even. And I have kids that are in Gen Alpha. And so Asbury is a university in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky area. And it's actually, the actual town's Wilmore, but it's a very small town. So if you've ever watched a movie with like small town stuff, that's pretty much what you imagine. Fields, and then all of a sudden a university pops up somewhere. But the Lord is doing something really unique and special for Gen Z at Asbury. And we'll kind of get into this a little bit more, but Asbury's university, it's a Christian university in Lexington, Kentucky, Wilmore, Kentucky area. And there's a couple of friends of mine, Luke and Logan Wentz, who I called up. And once we found out about this, move that the Lord was doing and just pouring out his love to young people, I called up and said, hey, do you guys want to go? Let's check it out. And they both said yes. And so one of them flew across the country and one of them drove a couple hours, and we picked up each other and then went on our way to visit Asbury. And I think in the beginning, I was thinking to myself, do I want to be like one of those revival hunters? Am I going to be that kind of person? And it's kind of cringy you talk about it that way, but it kept me from going for a while. But I think the question for me that rose in me was, is this real? Is this something 20 years from now we're going to look back at and be like, so glad that we went, so glad that we were there. And I'll speak for myself, and I really want to give you guys a chance to hear from Logan, because Logan is Gen Z. But I would say 100% this is real. God is doing something special. And I think it's a time for us to pay attention and lean in and learn, but also to get really curious about what God's doing for Gen Z and how we can come alongside what the Holy Spirit's doing and say yes to this generation. And so I do think 20, 30, 40 years from now, we're going to say to ourselves, so glad that we paid attention to this moment. So and we can unpack that here in a bit, but Logan, any context you want to give to Asbury and...
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm Logan Wentz, and I'm 19 years old, so I'm a part of Gen Z. And how I would describe the movement going on at Asbury is it's nothing special, really. It's a natural occurrence of worship and praise, but God is using it supernaturally. He's taking a natural thing that humans are doing and creating a supernatural place. So one of the first things, people are super quick to label it like a mass revival and stuff. And I think those words can have interesting meanings and things along with it. So when I first showed up, I was like, oh man, this is gonna be crazy. People like yelling, screaming, like there's a revival going on here. But it wasn't like that at all. When we pulled up, it was calm. It was really calm all throughout the campus. And when we walked into the auditorium, people were just sitting in worship. It was chill. and it was really good. So what I would describe it was worship. It was a place for people that come and worship.
In fact, I remember us driving and we're going down these back roads of the Kentucky trying to get to Asbury. And then, I remember one time you and I and Luke and my son, Caden, were in the car and we were thinking to ourselves, when are we going to enter the Wakanda bubble? Even preparing into like, when all of a sudden are we going to be like, the power of the Lord is coming down on you hot, and the reality was, I think when we think about revival, we hear these heavy terms of God's pouring out his love, revival. I think naturally we think to ourselves like Wakanda bubble-esque massive things. But I think what Logan is saying is something that's really true that we need to lean into. It's a naturally supernatural moment. You walk in, there's no Wakanda bubble, distortion, everything, people falling down, going crazy. You walk in and what you feel and what you sense in the room is deep hunger. And this reality that Jesus is meeting young people right where they're at. And if I was to even press into a little more of that, what I think, we come carrying kind of like ideas of what revival is, what, outpouring should look like and could look like. But I think for this moment, this is specific for Gen Z, and Jesus is meeting them right where they're at. And when you walk into this, I don't know, it's not a cathedral. It was
just 100-year-old chapel. It was
chapel.
Nothing special. It was just a chapel.
Very normal.
Looked old. I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and you walk in, but as soon as you walk in, you think to yourself like this. It does feel like it's like ongoing worship service, but if you paid attention to what the Spirit was doing, the Lord was meeting young people's hunger. And also deepening hunger at the same time and meeting it again and then taking them on this journey. And the best image I could come up with is this. And just gonna have to roll with it, okay? Because I know I'm an old man, borderline boomer kind of vibes going here, but we'll roll with it. It's as if you were at a wedding and the first dance for the couple goes on. And it was, in that moment, it felt like it was Gen Z and Jesus dancing with each other. And Jesus just singing over Gen Z, saying, I love you, I see you, I'm with you. But it's healing, it's peace, it's belonging, it's identity formation. And that's the only image I could come up with and see in the moment. It's like, that's what was happening. It's as if I got to view this beautiful dance that was going on at the wedding. And it was with Gen Z and Jesus. And Jesus was just pouring and singing over young people in the moment. And this is something that, you walk in, and Logan, I'd love for you to speak to this too, but you walk in, you think to yourself, who's the big name on stage? Who's the person that's going to be epic guitar player and epic singer who's like just really in tune with the Spirit, really laying down those tracks, laying down those vibes that everyone's going to be like, wow, about. And it was none of that. It was the most authentic, the most normal. You didn't go up there thinking to yourself, wow, that artist, they should be with us. But you walked in, you definitely felt Jesus is here. The Lord is here. Young people are meeting Jesus because it was very simply authentic young people, being led by the Lord and creating space for the Lord. Not crazy talent, not Christian famous people coming off stage, not people worried about the stage and them sitting them on the stage, but 100% leaning into what is the Lord doing and how it could be present to the moment. So, okay, I'm going to pause there. And Logan, I want to throw it to you because you are Gen Z. Can you speak to that? Because there's something there for us to even learn, all generations, about the authentic, real expression of Gen Z and what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gen Z, what they want is something real. Like, they don't want the crazy shows and the fakeness. Like, that's good. It's okay, but it doesn't connect with us. I mean, I grew up in youth groups my entire life, been going to the church, and there was always a big production. There was the smoke machine spraying down everywhere, and people like on stage were writing albums, and it was a lot. It was a lot of stage presence. So when I walked into Asbury, I kind of thought like, oh, there's going to be some crazy worship going on. Like, people are having a revival. And when I walked in, we sat down. It was just all acoustic. There was maybe 2 guitars, piano, and it was genuine hunger for the Lord. I play music. I'm in a band, and I've been doing music for a long time. And I was like, yeah, they kind of know how to play stuff, but it wasn't about that at all. It was they were hungry and wanted to be authentic. And you could feel it in the room.
First of all, this is incredible. And I guess like for myself, Charlie, and the rest of the world who've never been there, this is such an eye-opener. And also it's just like a breath of fresh air to even hear about it. And I guess for me, like one of my greatest prayers is that, you know, for Gen Z to taste and to see. And this just sounds like the answer to that prayer in so many ways. So just to follow up on that then, how would you two, having been there and having really felt what it was in terms of, you know, like being in the space, but also like spiritually receiving, like how would you encourage a church leader to help cultivate an experience like this? And I asked that question because I think one of the things is like, okay, so do we now manufacture this situation? Because it was actually like, it came out of really authentic surrender, didn't it? Like it was like, was it 19 young people stayed after chapel and they started worshiping and then it just went on and on and on. And it's just like, do we intentionally position our youth ministries or, I don't know, our churches to do this? Or is this just something that's happened and it's amazing? Or do you think that this is something that's happening all over the world? And, you know, it's not about like how big it is. It's just like people are probably doing this and revival looks different. So what would you say to a youth leader now that's like, okay, now, like, how do we jump in? How do we jump in? We can't go to Kentucky, okay? Flats are expensive. I'm not doing that. But what can we do to really cultivate this?
So, I mean, Gen Z is the furthest, most opposing thing to manufacturing an experience as you can be. So if people start manufacturing these revivals, are they really coming with the spirit for this revival, or is it really just them? Are they just copying what's going on at Asbury? It almost like takes it completely away. So I would say just create space. If something were to happen, well, there's the space there for it. There's the space that you've given Gen Z. If they just want to, hey, I really feel like I want to worship tonight. And they worship and 5 students are there and they really feel like God was here. God was in this moment. That was revival. It doesn't have to be thousands of people. Just a group of students being open. I mean, that's amazing. That's beautiful.
There's something that I knew, but was really playing out for me when I was at Asbury was, I think one of the enemies of hunger is hype. And when we choose to enter into hype, hunger becomes, even with God is stirring hunger in ourselves, we become distracted by the hype. And we almost like, rather than going, I don't know, maybe, okay, I'm full of metaphors. Okay, here we go. But rather than going after like a really amazing steak, you know, that you want to have, like that's the hunger you have is like some amazing meat. Or maybe for a vegetarian. Are you a vegetarian, Azande?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay. So, all right. But so like maybe you're craving something like a really amazing steak, but instead what you ended up with is like spam, which is, I don't know if everyone knows what spam is. It's like, it's not even meat. It's like a mixture of like grossness and grossness put together.
Meat. We'll call it that.
Okay, there you go. There. But it's as if you just, you went for something else other than what you really were craving. And I think for us, we have to be willing to like let go of all the hype. We don't have to make Jesus attractive to young people. In an age of digital distraction, Jesus is wildly attractive to young people. So when we were there was all like no one was raising their phones to capture the moment. You know who was? It was all the millennials and the Gen Xers and the boomers raising their phone to capture the moment. Gen Z was transfixed on the person of Jesus. They were people of the presence. They were honestly being present to Jesus in the moment. And so for us, like we have to lean in. So if you're a youth minister, if you're working with young people all around the moment, just our world, just know that I think hype is the enemy of hunger. And if we want to create space for hunger to grow, let's be authentic and real, enter into this space, but then also just let young people take the lead in this. And I think it's okay. And one of the things too that I love about the leadership at Asbury, when we saw them lead, there's a core crew of people that are helping steward this, and we were having chats with them afterwards, one person in particular. And what I love that he said was, he basically said, we are trying to be an umbrella for boldness. And he was intentionally talking about the space that he is creating for young people to grow in boldness. You know, the verse that comes to mind is like, you know, you don't have a spirit of timidity, or fear, but of boldness. And so he's creating this space he's protecting his space for young people to grow in love with Jesus and grow in boldness. So if you're a youth minister out there, older generations, how are we protecting the space for young people to grow in boldness? I think that's something that we have to lean into. But also what they were doing is they were genuinely listening to young people. There was a couple, I mentioned this before, there's a couple of Christian famous people who came. And if I was to tell you their names, they'd be like, well, yeah, get them on stage. Everyone like travels around the country to hear them speak. But being attentive to what young people wanted, but also being attentive to what the Spirit was doing, those Christian famous people weren't on stage at all. In fact, they just joined in the back of the auditorium, just like everyone else, or back of the chapel, like everybody else. But it was young people being attentive to the person of Jesus, transfixed by him. And the leadership was listening to young people, but also listening to what the Spirit wanted to do in the moment. And it was beautiful. So a couple of years from now, maybe later, I think that Asbury's leadership could give us a masterclass in how to create space really well for young people. And there's something there that I think we need to listen to and pay attention to and lean in. And I think one of the things is that we could run into a situation of like, let's just be a copycat, you know, let's double down exactly what Asbury did. And it's like, I would say, no, like, don't be a copycat. But what you should do is lean in to be present to what's the Lord doing, what are young people wanting, but then create that space for them. That's that. If you wanted to copy anything, copy that. But like, don't be a copycat that follows the exact rubric of what they did. I think it's one of those pieces where there's a lot of things for us to learn from Asbury, but I think they would probably be us saying to you, don't just copy us and what we did. Like, we listen to young people, listen to what the Spirit wants to do, listen to what Jesus wants to do in the lives of young people there. So anyway, those are some things that I would say to youth leaders and ministry leaders across the country. And it's really going off of what Logan is saying is like, is it real? Is it genuine? Don't manufacture something. Don't be the hype train. You know, like the hype train is real, and we just have to. I think we have to ruthlessly eliminate the hype. You know, it's okay for people to be excited about the person of Jesus, of course, but for us to manufacture the excitement and manufacture the hype, it's the enemy of hunger in that moment. Or it's something false that young people want something real.
Yeah, and I think just to go off of like what hype is not good, but I don't want you to confuse it with like excitement of worship, because when you are worshiping, you can be excited. People worship in many ways. People do get out of their chairs and jump around, and that's good, but that's the worship. You have to really have and be authentic and know how to discern, am I just doing this for the hype? Am I just doing this for the crowd? Do I know the things that'll make people clap during the sermon? Or am I just having a moment with God that I need to let loose? I need to go dance in the streets. So you have to have the discernment of hype and genuine worship.
I think like a mistake that I almost made, or that maybe some people listening might make, is that this is a leaderless thing. And then it just kind of happened out of nowhere, and there was a few students who stayed behind, and boom, like revival breaks out. But it's like what you're saying is no, like there's leaders, and they've been, I don't really know what they've been doing, but you're saying no, this is being strongly led. We just don't know who they are, which I think is so interesting and like beautiful.
It is really mature leaders intentionally creating space, because what young people want is a nameless and faceless movement, and the only name that's raised is Jesus. That's what young people want. And leaders are leading in such a way that it is coming across as nameless and faceless, other than like Jesus is doing something. But their leaders also aren't manufacturing anything. They're just attentive to what the Lord is doing and what young people are. And if I go back to the dancing illustration, they're attentive to the dance and what's happening, and the way in which young people are falling in love with Jesus, and the way that Jesus is trading anxiety for peace, the way that Jesus is creating connection in the midst of loneliness, and the way that he's bringing healing in really a spiritually abusive world that we're in. And so Jesus is just doing all this for young people, and there's a team of leaders who are creating this really wise space and structure to let Jesus bring all that he says he will bring to young people. And what's amazing is you talk to these leaders, and they would tell you, this has been our greatest joy to do this. This has been our greatest privilege to be a part of this. This has been something that we've longed for, and we're seeing Jesus do it. And so in some ways, Jesus is showing up in a really unique and profound way. And it is kind of like, there's a bit of a mystery to that. It's like Jesus is there, but at the same time, there is a team of people stewarding this and creating structure for this. And it's really beautiful. And the way that they're creating the structure and leading is the most loving way to the Lord, but also a loving way to a generation that's desperate for the hope that Jesus carries and Jesus is bringing to young people.
Gosh, I could, number one, listen to yourself, Logan, and Jordan speak forever. I think I'm so inspired by how you've been able to paint this picture to the rest of us who, all we have is like maybe a picture or two, and maybe like hearing somebody say something about it, which in itself, I think, is a phenomenon that it's happening, and it's not necessarily like it's doing the circuits around media and all of that kind of stuff. And we talked about the hype. It's almost like God's like, this is my thing, and this is how it's going to play out. And his hand is completely over it. And everything else has to be obedient to that. But I think I'd just love to hear your heart a little bit around, what are your hopes going forward? And like, what are you encouraged by? And maybe even more importantly, like, what did you sense? Like, when you were in that room, like, what did you sense specifically God was trying to say or shape in that moment?
So my hopes for what's going to come out of this Asbury movement is that people realize that can happen anywhere. And it doesn't have to be on any size, it doesn't have to be any numbers. It can just be you taking time to create space with the Lord and being real about it. And that's what I felt when I was at Asbury, was the real hunger of an entire generation. I mean, they're like a barren land, and God is the well. He is just waiting to pour out water for them. And he's like, generation is open. Like, Gen Z is waiting for something that is good. And Asbury was something that was good. So I think something that I took away from it personally was I didn't feel like God was like this overwhelming pressure. It wasn't this weight. You've probably walked into a room and you're like, whoa, Holy Spirit's here. Things are going on. But for me, I sat and I listened to the worship and I prayed, and I met God intimately in this moment. And when God was just saying, hey, create some space for me. And I was like, oh, I probably should do that. Like, what happens when we create space? Something like this. So, yeah.
The piece that I'm so hopeful for is there's a deep resilience among young people. And a lot of people like me, millennial Gen X boomers are, sometimes we come with the posture of this is a generation to fix, or they're a problem to solve. But again, this is showing us they're not a generation to fix. They're not a problem to solve. They're a people to love. And Jesus loves this generation. There is so much hope they're carrying hope in a unique, profound way. And I actually think the hope that they're carrying and the way they're encountering Jesus is going to be a window for even Gen X boomers, millennials to enter into a deeper relationship with Jesus. In a lot of ways, I think Gen Z is going to carry the torch the way forward here. And I'm seeing this play out. And I think one of the biggest things for me, if you're a leader, doing youth ministry work, or, maybe a senior leader listening and curious about what's happening, I think the best thing that we can do is be curious. Just be curious. Enter in, be curious. And when God shows up in power, and when God shows up in this way, I think one of the things that the imagery I've equated it to is kind of like when you build a little fire, you build a bonfire. In the first stages, you have to put kindling on, and then you light the fire, and it kind of like gets to go, and you need like small twigs to kind of keep it going. And then if you put like a big old log on top of it, it smothers it and crushes it, right? Or if you put gasoline on in that moment, there's a huge fire and explosion, but then it typically goes out because you destroyed it. That's just what happens. For us to enter in, when the Lord moves in this way, when the Lord's going to show up for young people in this way, I think we need to tenderly and gently attend to the fire. We need to tenderly and gently add little pieces here and there, little logs, little fuel to the fire in ways that are going to help the fire grow. And I think, what is that? I think, we talked about hype a lot. I think hype is throwing a big old log in the fire and expecting that log to catch fire. This is not the way it is. I think putting gasoline on the fire is expecting that this outpouring is going to be the same as the ones years past and accept the same fruit's going to come from it. Well, that might not be true. We just have to be curious and enter in with curiosity about what the Lord's doing. And then I think as we gently and lovingly tend to this flame, we also need to allow Gen Z to lead us to spaces that maybe we weren't able to go before. And that will unlock something in the church that would be really beautiful. And I really do think what's happening, if I was to set 30,000 feet view, what's the Lord doing? I really do feel like he is pouring out his love for Gen Z and reclaiming his own. And it's for Gen Z, but I think also the trickle effect and the overpour effect is going to be real for Gen Alpha coming up. And I think it's also going to be very real for the church. We've toured the country and always said that the Gen Z is a prophetic voice to the church. I think the Lord's like, yeah, they are. They're going to be a prophetic voice to the church. And let's rediscover the simplicity of what it's like to come to Jesus with us, non-hype, really authentic, really real, all of our questions, all of our doubts, all the things that we carry, and just say, Jesus, I'm here, and let him meet us in that space, and then allow him to carry us to wholeness. He's the one bringing us back to the garden. So we have to just know he's the one that's bringing us back to the garden. We're not going to all of a sudden stumble our way into the garden. Jesus is bringing us back to the garden. And that's something that we just have to know and understand. And I think Gen Z knows this acutely and is letting Jesus lead him back to the garden.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, with everything going on in Asbury, it is that fire. It is a fire with kindling, and it's not a raging fire yet. And I think that's what a lot of people are taking away, is their fire in their own hearts. They didn't get smothered by a log. They were given some kindling when they went there just to continue to grow their fire. And as people are leaving and Gen Z, is their fires are slowly getting that kindling, it's going to start burning hotter and hotter, and then it's going to start leading the next generation, Generation Alpha, because they'll look up to them and say, how did your fire grow like this? And they'll say, well, you got to be real. You got to be open. And then they'll be able to teach and show people, you just got to be open. You just got to put some kindling on there.
Just something that feels very apparent as well. Is that it feels like, yes, Gen Z are really, getting fired up. But it also feels like every generation is crucial in this. And it's not just about Gen Z, taking the lead and charging forward. It's like every single generation has a part to play. And how we almost take authority and move in this time will literally determine what Gen Alpha has in terms of their faith, what they will inherit. But it does, what I love, it also doesn't sound like, Gen Z are the trailblazers. It definitely sounds like a unity piece. And they've been given, a platform, and they've been encouraged, and they're leading in the authenticity, I guess, in making this such a special moment in time.
I think something I've learned from you two, and something that's really touching me right now, is like it just feels like such the kindness of God to meet this generation in the way that He has. It's like in an age where this generation are just done with like narcissistic leaders who want to make it all about themselves. We have no idea who the leaders are. It's like the most humble, like nameless, faceless leadership. I still don't know who they are after a half an hour conversation with you guys. It's like in an age of digital distraction as well. It's like that there was no digital distraction here. There was no hype. It was just genuine praise and adoration, and you describe it as like a dance, and I think that's stunning. And it's like, I got two more things that I've noted from what you've said. The other one is Logan, you used the word chill. Like, it was just chill, like it was just simple. And Jordan, you used the word peace, and it's like, for a generation whose like anxiety rates are just through the roof, it's like, wow, the kindness of God to meet them in a place where it's just chill, it's just peaceful. There's no anxiety here. We can leave that at the door.
People who do struggle with anxiety and depression, it was saying, come with all of your struggles and see what happens. Like, I will help you. Like, I'm the Prince of Peace. Come with your anxiety and see what I can do with it. So let me take it off you for a little bit so I can have this one-on-one, and let's continue to grow. And also, when we walked into what was going on the campus, there was two lines. As we were driving in, we could see the first line, which we thought we were gonna have to wait in, was wrapping around a block. It was like all around Wilmore, and like, oh man, like I don't want to be waiting for hours. We walked up to the chapel, and there was a second line just for Gen Z, and we got in like 15 minutes. And the person we were sitting next to, Jordan, had a chance to speak with her. She was like, I was waiting outside for 5 hours. And we got in 15 minutes.
Well, I think what this might point to is the attentiveness of the leadership to pay attention to what the Lord is doing. And they were attentive that the Lord is meeting young people, Gen Z. And so I think in some ways, the verse I guess that comes to mind is they were the ones with, when there was a guy who was lame, and the friends picked up the mat and dug a hole, and that's exactly what the leadership is doing. It's like, a generation may be crippled, and the Lord wants to heal them, and what the leadership did was just carry the mat, go up to the top of the roof, dig a hole, and lowered them right in front of him. And I love that. That, to me, is incredibly mature leadership and loving. The most loving thing that we could do is put people right in the presence of the King. So when we were there too, okay, it's gonna sound like a love fest for Asbury, and I don't know the media. I don't know what the media is doing, and I don't know what's coming out, but it's not. And I just want to be really clear. It's not as if Asbury is saying no one else other than Gen Z can come. That's not true at all. They were making space for everyone. But they were attentive to the reality that God really wanted to meet young people, Gen Z. And, they had water everywhere. They had like snacks everywhere for everyone. But they were also attentive to what the Lord was doing, creating space for the young people to meet Jesus in a really profound, unique way. So anyway, I know that, in that moment, I think we saw leadership lead well, and it wasn't Gen Z leading that. It was actually older generations. I think there's something there for us too, is like older generations were creating space for an encounter that young people want to have with Jesus. And so for us as older generations, how are we creating space for young people to have an encounter with Jesus? That matters. It's significant. And then also there is this longing for a generation to lean in to the older generation. And there's like this motherhood and fatherhood and family that we have to rediscover about the church. And you just kind of saw it there. And it was this beautiful, space. And the Lord's just kind, guys. Like, that's what it is. The Lord is kind and pouring out his love